This week we're taking a pause on talking about symbols in the Bible to focus in on something that you've probably been hearing a lot about over the past couple days. The topic of race is not one that God ignores, so we're going to spend today talking about how we as Christians are called to respond to the injustices in the world. But first, story time, and it's not really a fun story either. When I was of fusion age, specifically in grade 5, I was suspended for the first time. I know, bad Clarence, shame him in the streets, whoop whoop. Basically, I was pretty renowned at that time as the class clown. I would get up to all kinds of antics, say funny stuff all the time, draw ridiculous doodles during class, all that stuff. And what I would do is I had a do-a-tang and I filled it with all of my best joke material. I kept it in my desk and then I would share all those jokes with my friends during class or during recess. And you know, most of it was just lame puns, but by the end of the year it had evolved to take on a new sort of format of jokes. Now, I'm not going to repeat any of these jokes word for word, but I will say that every single one of those jokes centered around racist notions, racist punchlines, and racist language. So I knew a lot of these jokes weren't okay to say, so I tried to keep it on the down low as much as I could, but of course, eventually I got found out. Eventually, one girl in my class did hear the jokes, and she said that she was going to tell the teacher. And I'll never forget that she told me, "Your jokes hurt me and my culture." She told the teacher what I did, and I was suspended. No excuses. And I remember that I was angry that she had told on me. That I had been exposed in doing this thing that I thought was harmless, but was actually doing real emotional harm to another person. Somehow, even after being caught, I thought that this was all an injustice that was happening to me. I never even apologized to her. She moved schools the very next year. And you know, if I had just happened to have gone to a different school at that time, I might have been saying those hurtful words to some of my friends today. Some of whom are fusion leaders who love God, love you fusion kids, and who I cherish very much. And if I had just been born a couple years later, I might have been saying those hurtful words to some of you, who I love dearly. Today, there are people marching in the streets who have been hurt by people like me, and perhaps by people like you. For years, the Black community in our country, the United States, and around the world has not just been the subject of jokes, but huge issues like police brutality and racial assumptions and poor education. Here's the thing about the God that we believe in. He loves all his children dearly and equally. Acts 10 verses 34 to 35 says this. Then Peter began to speak. I now realize how true it is that God does not show favoritism, but accepts from every nation the one who fears him and does what is right. Peter, the rock on which Christ's church was meant to be founded, had to realize this. According to our sinful nature, it is going to be so much easier to look to the differences that divide us and be okay with them. Like I was. It is so much easier for us to sin and to be fine with how inequalities affect other people, especially if we live in a position of comfort and privilege. And the Bible has no end of messages for those who are in positions of privilege. Proverbs 31 sees wisdom pointed towards the most powerful person in the land, a king named Lemuel. And these are what verses 8 and 9 say. Speak up for those who cannot speak for themselves, for the rights of all who are destitute. Speak up and judge fairly. Defend the rights of the poor and the needy. What we are seeing right now are people speaking up for rights against the leaders who have not heeded that advice. Because of Lemuel's position, he should be doing all he can to amplify those voices, to listen to those voices, and again, defend them. Of course, it's not as simple as one person has privilege and the next person doesn't. I've been called plenty of things due to my skin color up to this very day, especially with anti-Asian sentiment related to COVID-19. I do have the privilege of walking around at night not feeling afraid because of my gender. I do have the privilege that I have enough money to attend a good university and to live comfortably. We're all going to have different areas of privilege in different parts of our lives. But just because we have privilege doesn't mean we have to just be ashamed of it all the time. Nobody in a Superman comic is telling him to just feel bad about his powers all the time and do nothing with his flight and heat vision. He still needs to harness those powers. To the degree that's in our power, we are called to be powerful advocates, always pointing to God's standards of love. This might be pushing your family to have conversations. This might be pushing your friends to have conversations. This might be pushing yourself to have conversations. When speaking to the Israelites at a time of crisis, Lamentations 3:40 says this: "Let us examine our ways and test them, and let us return to the Lord." The first step is to look at our own hearts and to ask God to show us where we've been behind and to forgive us for the way we might have closed off our brothers and sisters. I have told you kids that you are so capable, that you can make a difference, and that you are able to do things that can change the course of humanity forever. You are not the church of tomorrow. You are the church of today. When the Holy Spirit came down to the disciples of earth on the day that we call Pentecost, this is what happened. All of them were filled with the Holy Spirit and began to speak in other tongues as the Spirit enabled them. Now there were staying in Jerusalem God-fearing Jews from every nation under heaven. When they heard this sound, a crowd came together in bewilderment, because each one had heard their own language being spoken. Utterly amazed, they asked, "Aren't all these who are speaking Galileans? Then how is it that each of us hears them in our native language?" The church grew that day because people could understand each other, in spite of being all different races from all corners of the continent. Please, let's not forget to be speaking and listening to our Black communities anymore. Keep learning, keep loving, and keep stepping in accordance with the vision that God has put before us. Black Lives Matter.